Patch 13.21 is upon us with some nerfs, some buffs, and some other changes too. The first nerf goes to Azol, whose Q damage will now be slightly less when it's leveled and it's losing 5% AP scaling. Next, Briar is losing some attack speed growth and her W's bite will now scale less well with AD. However, she will heal for a good amount more of the remaining bleed when the target dies while bleeding. Following this, Caitlyn's passive now scales slightly less well with crit strike chance and her ultimate will now have a 90-second cooldown at all ranks. Her ultimate will also deal less flat damage but scale better with crit strike chance. Next, Dr. Mundo's E will now grant him less bonus AD, and he'll get less AD based on his missing health. Following this, Jinx's passive can now only be stacked 5 times, and upon killing epic monsters or structures, she can now only get the first stack of her passive and it resets its cooldown. And finally, the god at the moment that is Rammus is getting nerfed, losing early game damage on his Q and losing both flat armor on his W and also scaling armor on his W. The first buff goes to Belveth, whose E will now have a reduced cooldown at all ranks but especially felt during the earlier ranks. Next we have Hecarim, who will be getting an extra 0.5 AD per level and his W now lasts for 5 seconds. Following this, we have another wave of changes for Cassante, whose all-out bonus damage will now massively increase as it's leveled, his Q comes online earlier, his W can now be channeled for longer, and his attack resets during all-out are now instant. Next, LeBlanc's W and E will now both scale 10% better with AP. Following this, Master Yi's E cooldown is being reduced by 4 seconds. Next we have Morgana, whose W will now deal slightly more damage as it's leveled, and she will deal additional damage to monsters. Following this, we have Tahm Kench, whose passive damage will now deal less flat damage but scale better with health, and his W will now have its cooldown reduced further when hitting an enemy champion once leveled. And the final buff goes to Varus, whose W will now deal more damage as it's leveled, and the slow on his E is being increased by 5% at all ranks. We also have a number of adjustments for Brand, who's getting higher attack speed and higher attack speed growth. He's getting a massive extra 5 base armor but losing 0.5 armor growth per level, and he's losing 20 base health but getting an extra 3 health per level. In addition to all his stat changes, his passive will now deal a massive amount additional damage to monsters. However, his E will deal 5 less damage at all ranks. We also have some adjustments to Sarah, who is gaining base mana regen but losing some mana regen growth per level. She is also losing base mana but gaining mana growth per level, and she is gaining base armor but losing health growth per level as well as gaining attack speed growth. In addition, her Q has a lower cooldown early game and now scales with 50% AP. In addition, her W now costs a lot more mana and has a lower cooldown when leveled and also shields for more. And her E costs less mana as it's leveled and deals significantly more damage. And a final adjustment goes to Zyra, who is getting higher base attack speed. Her passive now deals slightly less damage but scales better with AP. Her Q now deals more damage when leveled and scales better with AP. And her E now deals less damage when leveled but scales better with AP. We also have a few other smaller changes, starting with Hullbreaker, which now won't give quite so many resistances as you go later into the game. We also have First Strike going down to 7%, and Phase Rush is also losing a decent amount of move speed, as once again they bring in a few more changes to try and make the rune systems as balanced as possible.